The silent call. Babysitting in a quiet suburban home has always been one of those easy gigs. The parents head out, you get the kids to bed, and then you're free to relax until they return. That's exactly what I expected when I agreed to babysit for the Browns. Their house was in a peaceful neighborhood, the kind where nothing ever seems to go wrong. After settling in, I put their little girl to bed with no trouble at all. She was asleep within minutes, and I headed downstairs to the living room. I curled up on the couch, turned on the TV, and started flipping through channels, feeling completely at ease. Around 10 p.m., the phone rang. It was Mrs. Brown, thanking me for watching their daughter and letting me know they'd be home a bit later than expected. Her voice was calm, casual, and reassuring. I told her everything was fine and that I'd see them when they got back. After hanging up, I went back to watching TV, not giving the call a second thought. But just a few minutes later, the phone rang again. I glanced at the clock. Maybe they'd changed their plans again. I picked up, expecting to hear Mrs. Brown's voice. Instead, what I heard was far from reassuring. "Hi, it's us again," Mrs. Brown said, but this time her tone was completely different. She sounded tense, almost panicked. "We're so sorry, but we've been delayed. We're just now calling to let you know." My heart skipped a beat. I froze. The phone pressed to my ear as her words sank in. "Just now calling to let you know." That meant the first call wasn't from them. I tried to stay calm. "But you called me a few minutes ago," I said, my voice wavering slightly. There was a pause on the other end. "No, we didn't," Mr. Brown's voice cut in, sounding just as alarmed as his wife's. "We haven't called you until now." My stomach dropped. The reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. If the Browns hadn't called earlier, then who had? And why? A chill ran down my spine as I slowly turned to look around the room. Everything seemed normal, but that only made it worse. Someone else was out there, or worse, inside the house, watching me. I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked, "Did you give anyone else the house number?" "No," Mrs. Brown replied, her voice trembling. "We wouldn't do that. Are you okay?" I didn't want to alarm them more than they already were, so I lied. "Yeah, I'm fine. It was probably just a wrong number." But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The first call had been too specific, too familiar. Whoever it was had known I was babysitting, and they knew enough to pretend to be the Browns. "I'll keep an eye out," I added, trying to sound brave. "But maybe you should come home as soon as you can." "We're on our way," Mr. Brown said firmly. "Stay calm and keep all the doors locked." I hung up, my hands shaking. The house, which had felt so safe and cozy just minutes ago, now seemed full of shadows and potential threats. I double-checked the locks on the doors and windows, my heart pounding in my chest. The silence in the house was now deafening, every creak and groan of the old wood sending my nerves into overdrive. I sat back down on the couch, trying to stay composed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every few minutes, I found myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there, watching me. I didn't dare move from the couch, afraid that if I did, I might walk right into whoever had made that first call. Time seemed to crawl by, each second feeling like an eternity. The only thing keeping me sane was the knowledge that the Browns were on their way home. Finally, after what felt like hours, I heard a car pull up in the driveway. The sound of the Browns' voices outside was like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of panic. They rushed inside, relief flooding their faces as they saw me. "Are you okay?" Mrs. Brown asked, hugging me tightly. "Yeah," I managed to say, though my voice was shaky. "But I think someone might have been watching me." Mr. Brown immediately checked the house, room by room, but there was no sign of anyone else. Whoever had made that call was long gone. They thanked me profusely, apologizing for the scare. But the truth was I couldn't shake the unease. As I drove home that night, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following me. It took days for the fear to fully subside. To this day, I still wonder who made that call. What was their motive? Were they just trying to scare me, or was it something more sinister? I'll never know for sure, but one thing's certain. That night changed the way I look at babysitting, and at the people who might be watching from the shadows. It was supposed to be an easy night. I had babysat for this family a few times before, and their little boy Ethan was always a joy to be around. He had this infectious laugh that could lighten any mood. So, when he suggested a quick game of hide-and-seek before bedtime, I didn't think twice. It was all part of the fun. I counted to 10, giving him ample time to find a hiding spot. The house was familiar to me, so I started searching the usual places, behind the curtains, under the bed, and even in the closet. But there was no sign of Ethan. His small giggles echoed through the house, but they seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. I tried to follow the sound, but it was like chasing shadows. Every time I thought I was close, the laughter would fade and reappear in another room. As the minutes passed, my amusement turned into concern. I checked every corner of the house, but he was nowhere to be found. The game was losing its charm, and I started to panic. I called out to him, trying to keep my voice steady, but there was no response, just that eerie, distant laughter. I felt a chill creeping up my spine. The house, once warm and welcoming, seemed to take on a darker, more sinister atmosphere. The laughter, which had been so joyful just minutes before, now seemed mocking, almost taunting. It was as if the walls themselves were playing tricks on me, echoing the sound in ways that made it impossible to pinpoint its source. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard the laughter coming from his bedroom. Relieved, I rushed in, expecting to find him hiding under the bed or behind the door. But as I stepped inside, the laughter stopped abruptly. The room was empty. The bed was made. Toys were neatly placed on the shelves, and there was no sign of Ethan. And then, out of nowhere, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression calm and confused. "I've been in my room the whole time," he said, his voice innocent and sincere. I stared at him, my heart racing, trying to process what had just happened. Had he really been in his room all along? Had I imagined the whole thing? The laughter, the searching, it all felt so real. But now, standing there in that silent room, I began to question my own sanity. I didn't say anything as I tucked him into bed, still shaken by the experience. After he fell asleep, I couldn't help but check the house one more time just to be sure. Everything was as it should be. The house was quiet again, but that sense of unease lingered. When the parents returned, I didn't mention the strange game of hide-and-seek. I didn't want to sound crazy. But as I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't been alone in the house that night. The locked room. The evening started like any other babysitting gig. The family was friendly and the house was spacious and well kept. Before leaving, the parents gave me the usual instructions: bedtime at 8 p.m., snacks in the fridge, and a strict warning to stay out of one particular room on the second floor. They told me it was under renovation, so I didn't think much of it. I just nodded, figuring I'd stick to the living room and the kids' bedroom. The night was uneventful at first. The child was well behaved, and we spent most of the evening playing games and watching cartoons. But as the hours passed and the house grew quieter, I couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward that off-limits room. Curiosity began to gnaw at me, even though I knew I shouldn't give in. But then I started hearing noises, soft thumps, like something was moving around inside the room. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the noises persisted, growing louder and more insistent. My curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself standing outside the door. It looked just like any other door in the house, but there was something off about it. The air felt colder as I stood there, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Finally, I couldn't resist any longer. I turned the knob, half expecting to find a room filled with construction materials, dust, and chaos. But instead, I was met with a perfectly intact room, untouched by any sign of renovation. The room was filled with old, dusty furniture, the kind you'd find in a forgotten attic. Antique chairs, a large wooden dresser, and a faded rug that had seen better days. The air was thick with the scent of dust and something else I couldn't quite place. What caught my attention most were the family photos that lined the walls. They were old, much older than the photos I'd seen in the rest of the house. The faces in the pictures were stern, unsmiling, and as I looked closer, it felt like their eyes were following my every move. It was unnerving, but I couldn't tear myself away. I stepped further into the room, feeling an uneasy chill run down my spine. Just as I was about to leave, the door suddenly slammed shut behind me with a force that made me jump. I rushed back to the door, my heart pounding, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. Panic set in as I banged on the door, hoping the noise would somehow alert someone, but the house remained eerily silent. I don't know how long I was stuck in that room. It felt like hours, the oppressive silence broken only by my frantic attempts to open the door. The faces in the photos seemed to stare at me with a mix of judgment and malice, their eyes boring into me as I struggled to find a way out. Finally, I heard the front door open. The parents were home. I yelled for help, and after what felt like an eternity, the door swung open. They stood there, looking at me with calm, slightly amused expressions, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "Oh, the door sticks sometimes," the father said casually, as if this was a common occurrence. "We should have warned you." I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but something in their demeanor stopped me. It was as if they expected this, as if they knew what I'd experienced but didn't care. I gathered my things and left as quickly as I could, not daring to look back at that room, or those photos, again. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to see, something the family had deliberately kept hidden. And though I tried to forget about it, the memory of those watching eyes stayed with me, lingering like a shadow in the back of my mind.